Deshaun Jackson brought Hugh Douglas in to talk to the team, and his message, I think, was perfect for the players. But there's a part of it that I think applies to the coaches and really Delaware State as a whole in year one. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. We'll wrap up today's episode by taking a look at the Black College Invitational Championship and how this was really a CIAA pride moment. In segment 2, Larry Vickers is off to Auburn, but why did he leave Norfolk State? His reasoning, I don't think it will surprise you. Matter of fact, he just puts into words what many people already knew. But in segment 1, Hugh Douglas came and talked to the Delaware State Hornets team in their 5th practice. He made sure to check with Deshaun Jackson that was the accurate number. But in his 5th practice, or after the 5th practice, Hugh Douglas came out and he talked to the team. And I thought that was an example of what we want with coaches like Deshaun Jackson. I thought that was number 1. And then number 2, I thought that it was a great soundbite that should encapsulate the projection of year 1. Real quick before I go into that, because that's going to be my second point. When I say the projection of year 1, things can change. This is not a perfect situation, but I think this is an ideal situation, probably a step below perfect. A perfect situation is you go and you dominate. A worst case situation is you come in and you just show no life. But I think an ideal situation is you show some life. This was a really bad team. You know what? Since we're already going on it, let's just go ahead and go there, and then we'll talk about why this is what you want out of coaches like Deshaun Jackson at the end of the segment. Delaware State was a non-contending team last year, the year before. They have not been good. The idea that Deshaun Jackson comes in and absolutely turns everything on his head, I think I'm not going to call it a pipe dream because we've seen it happen before, that new coaches come in and they just have a great turnaround, right? But I wouldn't bank on it. I think it can happen. It's realistic, but I do not think it is the most likely. The most likely is that you're better than you were last year, but maybe you're not competing for the MEAC. Mind you, the MEAC, except for last year, has essentially been a one-loss conference. Once you lose your second game, it's over. And I don't know if Deshaun Jackson or Michael Vick, for that matter, because they're in the same boat, I don't know if either one of them is a one-loss team in 2025. I think them being a 2, maybe even 3-loss team in conference play is very realistic. But if you go 3-2 in conference play under Deshaun Jackson, that's a win. To me, that is a great season. But we're not here to detail expectations. I just thought that laying out that broad framework of what I mean by a good season was important when it comes to what Hugh Douglas said. So, of course, we're reading things instead of playing them because I don't own these clips. But Douglas says Rome wasn't built in a day. You start with the foundation. This is the foundation, and you build from there. That's not something you've never heard before. We all know the cliche of Rome not being built in a day. But when we have these type of coaches, I do believe sometimes people think Rome will be built in a day. And Rome is rarely ever done like that. It's rarely even done like that. And I always mention this, even if you want to point to Deion Sanders when he was out in Jackson State, he had a spring season. Rome was not built in a day. These guys, these coaches Sometimes it happens, but don't bank on it. And if it doesn't happen, don't view it as a failure, because I don't. But when he says this is the foundation, technically, Hugh Douglas is talking about spring season. Technically, he's talking about the way you learn the offense, learn defense, schemes. He's technically talking about all of those things. But I can't help but let my mind wander to how that applies to the coaches, how that applies to the team. When it comes to the coaches, you have a bunch of people who are stepping into unfamiliar roles. Even if you feel like they can reach that potential, Deshaun Jackson has been coaching for a year up to this point. He still has to learn the basis of coaching in addition to being a head coach. That's right there. His mentor he brought with him, Coach Clark. He has to get accustomed to the collegiate game. You're looking at the coordinators, Coach Nemo, Coach Blackman. You're looking at those guys. They have to get accustomed to being at this stature on the coaching staff, at this status of football. These are all things that, Nemo, he's a rising star. I definitely believe that. Coach Blackman, he talked at length about the culture that they're trying to build and the people that he's been around. But here's the thing. No matter how many people that you've been around, you still got to go do it. It doesn't matter how many people you've had to set the standard or set the example. What about when you are the standard setter? What about when you are the example setter? You have to know how to operate in that capacity. And sometimes those are things that people have to learn and get adjusted to. Not everybody steps in and it's natural. That's why we highlight people who do things right away. If everybody did things at the drop of a dime, if everybody stepped into something and was successful, being a quick learner wouldn't be something that's praised. So when I'm looking at Delaware State and I'm hearing his comments about this is the foundation and then you build from there, I think that this is a foundational year. Whether he meant it that way or not, Hugh Douglas's quotes, I think, align with how we should view Delaware State in 2025. He says Rome wasn't built in a day. You start with the foundation. This is the foundation, and then you build from there. Yes, that happens in spring practice. But when you're talking about Delaware State from where they were and all of the people who are trying to lead them to where they're trying to go, this is a foundational year. How quickly will you build that foundation? How quickly will you start to build the first story and the second story? Because if your foundation is built solidly in spring ball and you are comfortable, maybe even the first couple of weeks of out of conference play, maybe we sitting here like, Delaware State really got some. They got some. And then you get into MEAC play and it's like, oh, we done beat North Carolina Central. We on that first story. Now we on that second story. Now it's a different conversation. But until we get to that point, I'm projecting them to have a foundational year where I just see glimmers of hope. Don't be 0-5 in conference play. Don't be 1-4. Don't be getting blown out on a consistent basis. Don't look to homecoming as an easy win and you barely get that. Like, no. I'm looking for Delaware State to show me something. I'm looking for Deshaun Jackson to show me something. Now, speaking of Coach Jack, I say that this is something that I expect when I get these type of coaches. Bring in players like Hugh Douglas. Hugh Douglas was in the league for 10 years, from 94 to 2004. There's a lot of people on this team who weren't even alive. Actually, the majority of those people weren't alive when Hugh Douglas was playing. Ain't that something? It's 2025. If you're 18 years old, you were born in 2007. If you're 22, you're born in 2003. So maybe those 22-year-old seniors were alive. Didn't witness, but were alive when Hugh Douglas played. But neither here nor there. That's funny to me. But you're looking at a guy who went to Central State, and he can look you in your eye, and he can say, they came and found me at Central State. And I know that everybody says that. Everybody says if you're good, they'll find you. But it hits different when somebody they actually found says that. That's why I was glad that Deshaun Jackson brought him in. You brought in a guy who played for the Eagles. I'm sure that's how they got connected and everything. But you brought in a guy who had NFL experience for a decade. You brought somebody who was at an HBCU. You brought somebody who can tell you, hey, if you're good, if you're great, they will find you. And it actually hits. Because to me, when I hear Joe Blow 634 say that, okay, man, they all say it. That's cliche. But when I hear Hugh Douglas say it, and I know that he's actually lived that life, I know that he's actually been at a Division II school, and they found him. Okay, now I'm sitting here like, you right. I could be great here. Rome wasn't built in a day. We have to make sure that we put in the discipline, because that's another thing that he said. Hey, they want people who are disciplined. And so often that doesn't happen. So often we are talented but not disciplined. And I'm trying to be better with that myself, of just being more disciplined in the things that I need to do. And I'll tell you right now, it is difficult. It is difficult. But if you want to get somewhere, you have to understand what it takes. Deshaun Jackson being a head coach helps these kids know what it takes to get there. It helps them have these connections. We talk about, oh, yeah, we want to get more kids to the league. Deshaun Jackson has the connections. I'll be honest with you, man. I think Isaiah Bolden was the only draftee from Jackson State. The only Jackson State signee or draftee. Ahmad Miller made it to, not Ahmad Miller, but Ahmad Miller. I hope I'm not confusing him with his brother. But Ahmad Miller, Senior Bowl. Like when you're talking about the connection, I think it's a little overblown. I need to know the steps to get there. I need to know the steps to get there so I can take those steps. It's not about being a handout. It's not, oh, I'm at this school, so here you go. You're in the NFL. It doesn't work that way. I don't care if Deshaun Jackson likes you. Hey, man, I really like that. I really like that wide receiver. If you're not taking the proper steps, it's all irrelevant. It is all irrelevant. So, you know what? I didn't know what I was going to talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode is going to be how these type of coaches are better equipped to keep players from entering the portal. That's what I'm going to say. These celebrity-esque coaches are more equipped to keep these players from entering the portal. Anyway, also, additionally, I'll just wrap it up with this. I thought that Douglas was refreshingly straightforward with them. He opened up the part saying, look, most of y'all not going to make it, but some of y'all can. And that's real. That's real. I don't want to sell nobody dreams of, at HBCU, we're all going to make it. Man, no, some of y'all aren't going to make it. Like it would have been true if this was the University of Delaware. It'd been true if this was Louisiana State University. It would have been true if this is Delaware State. Like, it doesn't matter. Most of y'all aren't going to make it. But this is what it takes to make it. Secondly, he talked about how he was disappointed in practice. He started fussing at him like he was a coach. Y'all doing all this finger pointing. I appreciated that. And I don't know if this is a problem of mine or what, but I appreciate and almost look forward to when people give me uncalled for criticism in a moment, because it makes the praise feel real. I know you're not just blowing smoke, because I could just sit here and have a kumbaya. Oh, y'all doing great. Yeah, man, I'm so proud of y'all. We can make it. Okay, but when you tell me I'm disappointed in how y'all doing, don't sweat it, because you can get better. But I'm disappointed in how y'all operated today, and that's not going to be winning football. All the other good things you said, I know are true. And I know it because you called me out on some less than favorable things that you saw. So maybe that's a problem with me. Maybe I gotta be different and not be looking for negativity. I don't know. Maybe I don't think I'm looking for negativity. I'm looking for authenticity. But I don't know. Saying it out loud kind of feels like, yeah, you need that negativity, Darrion. Maybe that's the motivation. Anyway, speaking of motivation, speaking of competitive nature, Larry Vickers left Norfolk State simply to feed his competitive nature. By looking at the quotes that he dropped, it's clear. The reason Vickers is at Auburn is because he needed a new challenge. And you know what? I think this was the right time to do it. Let's explore that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in the plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. I hate with all of this AI stuff. I want to talk to a real person, and Supply House allows me that opportunity. So join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM. That is T as in Terrence and M as in Marshall. And start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical work today. with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first offer. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked on College Basketball. This is the biggest time. This is the biggest time of the year in that sport, and you are not going to want to miss it. Isaac Shade is going to help you. Isaac and Andy, I would reckon, are the best in the game, and I ain't even biased when I say that. Anywho, speaking of college basketball, somebody they're going to have to cover next year is Larry Vickers, who is the new head coach for Auburn women's basketball. And I think that his journey through Norfolk State has been special. I think that it has been legendary. I think that it will never be forgotten. With no amount of time will you forget what Larry Vickers was able to do when he was leading Norfolk State women's basketball into battle. But with all that being said, it was time. I think we all saw that. The writing was on the wall. You can only be so great at HBCUs until we expect you to depart. And I felt like, check your watch, it was about that time. It genuinely was. And I don't walk away critical when I say that. If the reports hadn't came out, because I seen people say it came out at halftime. I swear I saw Vickers connected to Auburn. Maybe not Vickers was signing with Auburn, but connected to Auburn before the game. And that's all I needed to hear. Once I heard he was connected to Auburn, I knew he was going to go. But I didn't need to see that report to know he was likely going to go somewhere. All that report did was give me a destination. I don't know about you, but for me, I knew Larry Vickers was more than likely leaving Norfolk State. This is the reason he said he did it now, because he could have done it last year. But this is the reason he's doing it now. He said, I checked everything on my Norfolk State bucket list except winning a NCAA tournament game. That was the only thing we didn't check off. I would have never planned for a mid-major to win 30 games. So for me, it's about what's next. I'm going to be honest with you. If the only thing you didn't check off your bucket list was winning an NCAA tournament game, I'm chunking the deuce too. Because that already means that my idea is I'm going to go elsewhere. It's not easy as a MEAC school to win an NCAA tournament game. It's not easy to win an NCAA tournament game, period. But when you know that your ceiling is probably a 13 seed, maybe a 12 seed, and it's extremely difficult to get that, you are always going to be at a disadvantage. You're more than likely going to be a 15 or a 16. And yes, I know that Vickers was a part of that Norfolk State team that won as a 15 seed way back when. But I think he has a good understanding. It's not easy to do. I would argue that Larry Vickers hit his head on that ceiling or maxed out his value. Depending on how you want to phrase it, I view both to be true. It's not to say that he could never win another game or never win an NCAA tournament game, but it would have been extremely difficult to do. You do not have seasons like this often. I understand that he is a great coach, but you do not have seasons like this often. The iron is as hot as it's going to be. And if you're talking about striking when the iron is hot, this is the most you could have done it, because they've steadily built up over the last couple of years, 26 wins, 27 wins, 30 wins. So you're seeing a team that just explodes. But at the same time, you're about to lose two of your best players. I don't know what Kiera Wheeler does if he does stay. So maybe you lose one, but let's go with the idea that you lose both. I don't think that Larry Vickers has the luxury of this reality that I'm about to paint to become true. I go 31 season. I'm a 13 seed. I'm really close against Maryland. The following season, I lose 2 games in conference play instead of going undefeated. I lose 2 games. Or maybe I even just lose 1, and then I lose in the conference finals. Because this happened to Tamika Reed, and she ended up having to stay another year, and then she went to Charlotte. She ended up going to Charlotte. And I think that, honestly, she could have got a job like Auburn, a P4 job. That's my personal opinion. But, you know, I didn't want her to leave either. I don't think that Vickers could go however many conference games they have, lose 1 game, lose 2 games, and then lose in a conference tournament. even if it's in the finals, I think that we would have sat there and said, oh man, he ain't got Kiera Willie, he ain't got Diamond Johnson. Look at how he turned over the roster. Some of the players who had lesser roles, they have now increased their spot in the rotation. They're more important. Look at Debria Clark, look at Nia Fields. Like, I think we would have had those conversations of, wow, they stepped into bigger roles and look what they're doing now. This is a very impressive coaching job. I do agree we would have said that. But I think the Auburns of the world would have looked and said, you didn't get to the NCAA tournament again. Or maybe you end up being a 15 seed or a 16 seed this year instead of being a 13 seed like you were the year prior. I don't think that Vickers has that luxury. And because he doesn't have that luxury, I don't necessarily know that coming back and having this another year would have made the most sense if my eyes are already over there. That's the important part. If your eyes are already over there. So I am extremely grateful for what he was able to do over the last 3 years, the three-peat that he was able to construct, the team that he was able to build, the stars he was able to bring in, but he's looking to bring more stars. And this is what he says. There's no better league that is going to test your X's and O's and your ability to recruit than this one. And he's talking about the SEC. He's done it all. He's done everything he possibly could at Norfolk State University, and now he's stepping into a conference with Don Staley, with Kim Mulkey, with the legendary program of Tennessee, with a team like Texas, with a conference that has 6 teams in the college women's basketball Sweet 16. That's nearly half of the teams are represented by this conference. So yes, your ability to coach, your ability to recruit is going to be tested. And man, he sounds like a competitor because he ain't running from no smoke. He ain't ducking no challenge. He understands exactly the opportunity, the exact situation that he's stepping into. And you know what? I wish him the best of luck. This is not going to be easy for him, but we'll see how it all turns out. Let's go through and let's talk about the Black College Invitational Championship because this was CIAA Pride. It's going to be a very brief discussion as we close out today's episode of Locked on HBCU. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? I know it's tax season, so maybe you have to pay them people. But maybe that's not your reason. Maybe you've been spending too much money on online shopping. Maybe you've been going out to eat a little bit too much. Maybe you've been just going to the mall and buying some shoes too often. I don't know. But Monarch Money is going to allow you to keep track of all of your spending. It's not just a command center, man. This is like a personal CFO for you. Monarch Money isn't just going to budget. It's not. It's going to help you track your accounts, your investments, and your spending in one place. So you stop just managing money and you start building your wealth. You know what? You'll be surprised when I download this. I saw where all of my money was going, and it allowed me to stop some of my bad spending. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. The Black College Invitational Championship really ended up being CIAA Pride. Congratulations. I don't have any dog in the race, but I'll say this. I do find myself gravitating a little bit more towards the SIAC. Because, I mean, I'm a Southern guy. Y'all see it. Well, I guess you don't see it right now because I'm not at my home base. But South exclusives on the Twitter. Mouth of the South is a nickname. I always say it every day. I'm a Southern bred man. When I was in fantasy, I used to always name a team Southern bred. I have pride in being from the South. So, yeah. I want the SIAC to have a little bit more success, but when you look at the Black College Invitational Championship, it ended up being CIAA Pride. Not in a sense that that's all that was there. even though it was primarily, you had a men's and women's bracket of 4 teams apiece. It was 3 CIAA teams in both. It didn't turn out too great for our SIAC teams. Like you look at Central State, who they lost in the first round, and then they go to the consolation round, the third place prize, and they end up losing to Johnson C. Smith. That's okay. That's okay. They didn't get that done. But on the men's side, we did have Clark Atlanta make it to the championship against Virginia Union. And when it's Clark Atlanta, or excuse me, not Virginia Union. Make sure I got that right. Against Livingstone. The Clark women went ahead and faced Livingstone. Yeah, they faced them. I don't know. I just had a brain fart for some reason. But Central State lost to Claflin on the men's side. Central State lost to Claflin. Johnson C. Smith versus Virginia Union. Oh, I'm sorry. Clark Atlanta women went on to play Johnson C. Smith. That's why I was confused. I'm like, what am I talking about? And Claflin went on to beat Virginia Union. But that's the IAA pride, man. Clark loses that game. Clark loses to Johnson C. Smith, unfortunately. And it was a good game. They actually had the lead, and then JCSU hawked them down. And I think that Claflin versus Union, that's just CIAA together, and Claflin wins that game. They beat Union in a close one earlier this year. They won this one by a little bit more. But when I look at this Black College Invitational Championship, I always view it through a lens of this is conference pride. This is why I love it, because you have schools who, in an ideal world, you would have an SIAC bracket and you have a CIAA bracket. That's, in my personal opinion, that would be a best way to do it. And then they meet in the championship game as a conference versus conference game. Or, and I think that's the way they were going to do it before they had to compress it and condense. Or you have a CIAA versus SIAC matchup and 2 of those in the first round. That is how I would do it. But regardless, the CIAA had more teams in the college basketball tournament on the D2 level. They end up winning both of the championships in the BCIC. In other words, CIAA reigns supreme when it comes to basketball. Maybe next year, my Southern brothers will get it done. But I thought that the BCIC was a great event. I think that it's something that we need to continue to support. I will try to make sure that next year I will know exactly when it is, and I will try to buy my ticket so I can get out there to Charlotte and be able to be a part of this great event. I think that for us, by us, right? I think that it's important that we support our own events and that we take care of business. Joshua Sims is a good brother. All right, that's a good brother. And he's putting on an event that I think is important for us. And I think that if they're going to continue to ice us out of postseason play, which they didn't do this year, but they have done before, if they're going to continue to do that, we have something that can be viable. We have something that can bring in money, and we have something that we as a people can support. And I don't just mean Black, I mean specifically HBCU family, whether you connected to by friends, by family, by your own self. I think that we need to go ahead and show love to this. I've said it yesterday or last week. I'll say it again. I'll say it till my eyes turn blue. I think that the Black College Invitational Championship is something we all need to experience, and I will try to make sure I experience that next year. But in the meantime, in between time on tomorrow's episode, like I thought of midway through segment 1, I think that celebrity coaches are the best way to keep players out of the transfer portal. I'm going to do some research on that and get back with you guys tomorrow. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.